The morning sun cast long shadows across the glass walls of Meridian Financial as Ethan Rivera adjusted his tie for the third time. Today marked his first official day as Regional Development Director, a position he'd fought tooth and nail to achieve. At 32, he was the youngest department head in the company's history, and the weight of proving himself pressed against his shoulders like an old, familiar friend. He settled behind his new mahogany desk, savoring the moment before diving into the stack of orientation folders. New hires, transfers, quarterly projections, the usual corporate maze that had consumed his life for the past 5 years. Ever since, Ethan shook his head, banishing thoughts that belonged in the past. He opened the first folder and began scanning the list of new employees joining his department. Marketing assistant, junior analyst, project coordinator. His pen paused mid-note as his eyes caught a name that made his blood freeze. Sophia Matthews. The folder slipped from his suddenly numb fingers, scattering papers across the polished surface. It couldn't be her. Not after 3 years of carefully constructed distance. Not when he'd finally convinced himself that the ache in his chest was just muscle memory. But there it was, printed in stark black letters. Sophia Matthews, Senior Marketing Specialist, transferred from the Denver branch. His mind raced back to college, to late nights in the library that turned into early mornings in his dorm room, to the way she'd laugh at his terrible jokes and trace patterns on his chest while they talked about their dreams, to the fight that ended everything. Harsh words about priorities and futures, about him choosing his career over her, about her needing someone who would put her first. She disappeared the next day, leaving only a note saying she needed space. He'd waited, called, even driven to her apartment, but she was gone, completely, utterly gone. Now she was here walking into his building, about to become his employee. The knock on his door came at precisely 9 a.m. "Come in," he managed, his voice steadier than his hands. The door opened, and time seemed to stutter. 3 years had only made her more beautiful. Her dark auburn hair was shorter now, more professional, framing the same heart-shaped face that had haunted his dreams. She wore a navy blazer that accentuated her curves, and when her emerald eyes met his, he saw the exact moment she realized who he was. Ethan. His name fell from her lips like a prayer and a curse combined. Sophia. He stood slowly, grateful that the desk hid his trembling legs. "I didn't realize you were the new hire." She clutched her briefcase tighter, knuckles white against the leather. I didn't know you worked here." The silence stretched between them, filled with 3 years of unspoken words, until a small voice shattered it completely. "Mama, you forgot to give me my juice box." A little boy burst through the office door, all energy and wild brown curls, holding up a cartoon-covered drink box like a trophy. He couldn't have been more than 5, with grass stains on his knees and the fearless confidence that only children possessed. Ethan's world tilted sideways. The boy looked up at him with curious eyes, eyes that were an exact mirror of his own unusual amber shade. The same strong jawline Ethan saw in the mirror every morning. The same slightly crooked smile that his mother had always said was his most distinguishing feature. "Oliver, what did I tell you about running off?" Sophia's voice was strained as she moved protectively toward the child. But Ethan couldn't hear her words over the roaring in his ears. Couldn't focus on anything except the undeniable truth staring back at him from a 5-year-old face. His son. The clock on Ethan's office wall ticked past 7 p.m., each second echoing in the empty building like a countdown to an inevitable explosion. He'd managed to get through the orientation meeting on autopilot, his mind reeling while he watched Oliver color quietly in the corner, occasionally glancing up with those unmistakably familiar eyes. Sophia had barely spoken, her professional mask firmly in place, but he caught the way her hands trembled when she signed her employment papers, the way she kept glancing at him when she thought he wasn't looking. Now, with the building nearly empty, she sat across from his desk while Oliver played with toy cars on the small conference table nearby. The silence was suffocating. 5 years. Old, Ethan said finally, his voice rough with emotion. Sophia's composure cracked slightly. Ethan, please. 5 years, Sophia. He leaned forward, amber eyes blazing. You've kept my son from me for 5 years. He's not. She stopped herself, the lie dying on her lips as Oliver laughed at something, the sound an exact echo of Ethan's own childhood laughter. You don't understand. Then make me understand. His voice was barely controlled fury mixed with desperate pain. Because from where I'm sitting, the woman I loved disappeared without a trace, and now I find out she was carrying my child. Tears gathered in her eyes, but her chin lifted defiantly. You think it was easy? You think I wanted to raise him alone? Then why? Because I was terrified. The words exploded from her, years of suppressed emotion finally breaking free. Do you remember what you said that night? That you'd never let anyone trap you with unexpected responsibilities? That your career came first, always? The memory hit him like a physical blow. They'd been fighting about their future, about her wanting more commitment while he focused obsessively on his career goals. He'd been cruel, using words designed to hurt. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after our fight, she continued, her voice breaking. I was 22, terrified, and the man I loved had made it crystal clear that a baby would be the last thing he'd ever want. Ethan closed his eyes, the weight of his past stupidity crushing down on him. Sophia, I thought, about telling you 100 times. But every time I picked up the phone, I remembered the look in your eyes when you said those things. I couldn't bear the thought of you thinking I was trying to trap you. So you just left. His voice was hollow. I got a scholarship to finish. My degree in Denver. My aunt helped with Oliver while I worked and studied. She wiped her eyes, smearing her mascara. I built a life for us. A good life. Oliver looked up from his cars, sensing the tension. Mama, why are you crying? Sophia forced a smile. Mama's just tired, sweetheart. The little boy abandoned his toys and climbed into her lap, wrapping his small arms around her neck. The gesture was so tender, so protective, that Ethan felt his heart shatter completely. I'm sorry, he whispered, the words inadequate but all he had. I'm so damn sorry, Sophia. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw the girl he'd fallen in love with beneath the strong, independent woman she'd become. I know, she said softly. Can I? He swallowed hard, his eyes on Oliver. Can I know him? Please. I know I have no right to ask, but you're his father. The simple statement held the weight of everything they'd lost and everything they might still salvage. Oliver peeked at him over Sophia's shoulder, curious and unafraid. Are you my mama's friend? Ethan's throat closed up. He looked at Sophia, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Yes, he managed. I'm your mama's very old friend. Do you want to see my cars? I have a red one that goes super fast. Before Ethan could respond, Oliver had slipped from Sophia's lap and was pulling him by the hand toward the conference table. As those small fingers wrapped around his, Ethan felt something fundamental shift in his chest. A fierce, protective love unlike anything he'd ever experienced. This one's my favorite, Oliver said, holding up a battered red sports car. It's like the one in my dreams. Ethan knelt beside him, studying the toy with the seriousness it deserved. It's perfect. Just like you. When he looked up, Sophia was watching them with tears streaming down her face, her hand pressed to her mouth. In that moment, surrounded by scattered toy cars and the innocent chatter of his son, Ethan knew with absolute certainty that he would spend the rest of his life making up for the years he'd lost. 2 weeks into their new arrangement, Ethan discovered that working with Sophia was both heaven and exquisite torture. She was brilliant at her job. Her marketing campaigns were innovative and effective, but every meeting became an exercise in restraint. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating, the subtle scent of her perfume when she leaned over his desk to point out figures, the brief touch of her fingers when she handed him reports. It was killing him. The Morrison account is responding well to the family-focused angle, Sophia said, standing at the presentation screen in his office. She wore a fitted black dress that made his concentration scatter like leaves in the wind. Good. That's good. He forced himself to focus on the charts instead of the graceful curve of her neck. She turned to face him, and their eyes met across the room. The air crackled with unspoken tension, 3 years of separation and longing condensed into a single moment. "Ethan," she started, then stopped as his assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Rivera? Your 4 o'clock is here." The spell broke, leaving them both slightly breathless. Right. Yes, thank you, Janet. But it was the evenings that truly undid him. 3 times that week, he'd picked up Oliver from daycare, taking him to baseball games and the Natural History Museum. Watching his son's face light up with wonder, seeing his own curious nature reflected in those amber eyes, filled holes in his heart he hadn't even known existed. And then the T-Rex went roar, Oliver demonstrated, complete with clawed hands and fierce expression, as they sat in Ethan's car outside Sophia's apartment building. "That's terrifying," Ethan said seriously, making Oliver giggle. "You'll have to protect me if we ever see a real one." "I will. I'm very brave. Mama says I get it from my daddy." Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "She talks about me? Sometimes, when she thinks I'm sleeping, she cries and says she's sorry and that she loves my daddy very much." The confession hit him like a punch to the gut. All this time, he'd assumed she'd moved on completely, that their love had died with their relationship. But if Oliver was right, "Should we go up and see Mama now?" Oliver asked, already unbuckling his seatbelt. Sophia's apartment was small but warm, filled with Oliver's artwork and pictures of their life together. Ethan felt like an intruder in their carefully constructed world, but Oliver pulled him in, enthusiastically, showing off his room and his books. "Stay for dinner," Sophia said as she stirred something that smelled amazing on the stove. "It's just spaghetti, but there's plenty." The domesticity of it, setting the table while Oliver chattered about his day, Sophia humming softly as she cooked, the 3 of them eating together like a real family, was everything he'd never known he wanted. "This is really good," he said, twirling pasta around his fork. "It's Mama's secret recipe," Oliver announced. "She puts love in it," Sophia blushed. "Oliver, it's true. You always say that food tastes better when you cook it with love." Their eyes met across the small table, and Ethan saw the same longing he felt reflected in her gaze. The same, what if that had been haunting his dreams? Later, after Oliver had fallen asleep during a movie, curled up between them on the couch, like it was the most natural thing in the world, Sophia walked Ethan to the door. "He adores you," she said softly, her hand on the doorknob. "He's incredible. You've done an amazing job raising him." "I had help. My boyfriend David has been wonderful." "With Oliver." The words hit him like ice water. Of course she hadn't been alone all this time. A woman like Sophia wouldn't stay single for long. "I see." He kept his voice carefully neutral. "He's a lucky man." "Ethan, it's fine, Sophia. Really, I'm just grateful to be part of Oliver's life now." But as he drove home through the dark streets, his hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white. 3 years too late. That's what he was. 3 years too late to claim the family that should have been his. The next evening, he was working late again, trying to lose himself in quarterly projections when Sophia appeared in his doorway. "Everyone else has gone home," she said, stepping into his office and closing the door behind her. "I noticed." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. She'd changed from her work clothes into jeans and a soft sweater that made her look younger, more like the girl he'd fallen in love with. "We need to talk about what happened last night. About David. There's nothing to talk about. You have a life, Sophia. A good life. I'm not going to complicate that." She moved closer to his desk, her green eyes flashing with frustration. "Don't I get a say in what complicates my life?" "What are you saying?" Instead of answering, she walked around his desk until she stood directly in front of him. Close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her eyes, close enough to smell her shampoo. "I'm saying that seeing you every day, watching you with Oliver, pretending that there's nothing between us, it's killing me." His breath caught. "Sophia." "David is safe, stable, everything I thought I needed." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "But he's not you." Before he could respond, she leaned down and kissed him. Soft at first, tentative, then deeper when he didn't pull away. 3 years of separation, of longing, of regret poured into that kiss. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer as she settled onto his lap, her fingers threading through his hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered. "Not for a single day." "Sophia." He cupped her face in his hands, thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. "What are we doing?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I can't pretend anymore. I can't pretend that seeing you with our son doesn't feel like coming home." The word "our" sent warmth spreading through his chest. Our son, our family, our second chance. But even as he held her, even as every fiber of his being screamed that this was right, the rational part of his mind whispered warnings. She had a life, commitments, a man who loved her and Oliver. And he was still the same career-driven man who had let her go once before. The question was, had he learned enough from his mistakes to fight for them this time? The company retreat to Mountain Ridge Resort was supposed to be about team building and quarterly planning. Instead, it became the weekend that changed everything. Ethan found himself watching Sophia during the morning strategy session. The way she commanded the room with quiet confidence, fielding questions about her innovative marketing approaches. Pride swelled in his chest, not just for her professional success, but for the strength she'd developed during their years apart. "You're staring," she murmured as they broke for lunch, falling into step beside him on the forest trail. "Can you blame me?" He kept his voice low, aware of their colleagues nearby. "You're incredible up there." The compliment brought color to her cheeks. "Ethan, we can't, not here." "I know." But the tension between them was becoming impossible to ignore. Every accidental touch, every shared glance, every moment of forced professional distance was slowly driving him insane. That evening, after dinner and drinks with the team, Sophia had retreated to her room early, claiming a headache. Ethan was nursing a whiskey in the hotel bar when David appeared. He was exactly what Ethan had expected: tall, clean-cut, wearing khakis and a polo shirt that screamed suburban stability. The kind of man who would never let career ambition override. Family, who would be home for dinner every night and coach Little League on weekends. The kind of man Sophia deserved. "You must be Ethan Rivera," David said, extending his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm David Chen, Sophia's boyfriend. Thought I'd surprise her this weekend." Ethan shook his hand, noting the firm grip that lasted a beat too long. "Nice to meet you. Sophia's mentioned you." "I'm sure she has. We've been together for 2 years now. Very serious." David signaled the bartender for a beer, his movements casual but his eyes sharp. "Oliver calls me Dad." The words were a direct hit designed to wound, and they succeeded. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. "He's a great kid." "Yes, he is. and he doesn't need any confusion in his life right now. Sophia and I are talking about marriage, about giving him a stable family unit. That's between you and Sophia. David leaned closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Stay away from my family, Rivera. I know what you're trying to do, showing up in their lives after all this time. But Oliver is my son in every way that matters, and Sophia has moved on. Don't make this messy. Before Ethan could respond, David drained his beer and walked away, leaving behind the clear scent of threat and territorial marking. An hour later, Ethan was walking the hotel corridors, too agitated to sleep, when he heard raised voices from one of the rooms, Sophia's voice, strained and upset, David's, getting progressively louder and more aggressive. Tired of making excuses for you? You've been different ever since you started that job, and I know it's because of him. David, please keep your voice down. People will hear. I don't care who hears. I've been patient, Sophia, but I'm done playing games. We're getting married this fall, and you're putting in for a transfer away from Denver, away from him. You can't just decide my future for me. I can when you're clearly not thinking straight. You have responsibilities, Sophia. To me, to Oliver. The sound of something hitting the wall made Ethan's blood freeze. Without thinking, he pounded on the door. Sophia? Everything okay in there? The voices stopped abruptly. Footsteps, then the door opened to reveal David's flushed face and Sophia behind him, her hair mussed and tears on her cheeks. We're fine, David said through gritted teeth. Just a private discussion. Doesn't sound private, Ethan said, pushing past him into the room. Sophia, are you hurt? I'm fine, she said quietly, but her hands were shaking. See? She's fine. Now get out. I wasn't talking to you. Ethan's voice carried the dangerous calm that had served him well in hostile boardroom negotiations. Sophia, do you want me to leave? She looked between them, torn and frightened. David, maybe you should go. We can talk tomorrow. Like hell, I'm leaving you alone with him. David's control finally snapped completely. I know what's going on here, Sophia. Don't think I'm blind, but I'm not losing you to some deadbeat who abandoned you once and will do it again. That's enough. Ethan stepped forward, every protective instinct blazing. You need to leave, now. You. Don't get to tell me what to do. She's mine. I don't belong to anyone. Sophia's voice cut through their posturing like a whip. I'm not a possession to be fought over. In the stunned silence that followed, a small voice piped up from the doorway. Mama? They all turned to see Oliver standing in the hallway, in his Spider-Man pajamas, having somehow slipped away from the babysitter David had hired. His amber eyes, so like Ethan's, took in the scene with the frightening perceptiveness of children. Why is everyone yelling? Oliver asked, then spotted Ethan. His face lit up with pure joy. Daddy, you're here too. The word hung in the air like a bomb. David went white, then red, his eyes swinging between Oliver and Ethan with dawning comprehension. Daddy? David's voice was barely a whisper. What the hell? Oliver ran to Ethan, who scooped him up automatically, the child's arms wrapping around his neck with perfect trust. Daddy, are you staying in our hotel too? Can we have breakfast tomorrow? Can we go swimming? Oliver, honey, Sophia started, her voice thick with tears. But David was already backing toward the door, his face a mask of betrayal and rage. 5 years, he said, his voice hollow. 5 years I've been raising another man's child, and you never told me. David, wait. No. He held up a hand, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Don't. Just don't. I can't. I need to think. He walked out, leaving the door open behind him. In the silence that followed, Oliver looked between his parents with confusion. Did I say something wrong? No, sweetheart, Sophia whispered, taking him from Ethan's arms. You didn't do anything wrong. But as she held their son, her eyes met Ethan's over his head, and he saw the same truth reflected there that was burning in his chest. There was no going back now, for any of them. Later, after they'd gotten Oliver settled in Sophia's room with promises of swimming and breakfast, Ethan and Sophia stood on the balcony overlooking the moonlit mountains. The night air was cool and sharp, filled with the scent of pine and possibility. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "about David finding out that way. About Oliver calling you what he called you. Are you? Sorry, I mean." Ethan moved closer, his hands finding her waist in the darkness. Because hearing him say that, it felt like coming alive again. She leaned into him, her head resting on his chest. "I've been living half a life for 3 years, Ethan, pretending that what we had wasn't the most real thing I've ever felt." He tilted her chin up, studying her face in the moonlight. "And now? Now I'm terrified," she admitted. "Terrified that you'll break my heart again. Terrified that I'm making a mistake. But more terrified of spending the rest of my life wondering what if." He kissed her then, soft and desperate, pouring 3 years of longing into the connection. When she responded, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer, he felt the last of his restraint crumble. "Sophia," he whispered against her lips. "I love you. I never stopped loving you." "Show me," she whispered back, her green eyes dark with need. "Show me you're not going anywhere this time." He swept her into his arms, carrying her back into the room where their son slept peacefully, unaware that his world was reshaping itself around him. In the adjoining bedroom, with moonlight streaming through the windows, Ethan worshipped Sophia's body with 3 years of pent-up devotion, memorizing every curve, every sigh, every shiver of pleasure. They made love with desperate intensity, as if they could somehow reclaim the lost years through the connection of skin against skin, breath mingling with whispered promises and declarations of love. When she cried out his name, her body arching beneath him, he felt complete for the first time since she'd walked out of his life. Afterwards, she lay in his arms, tracing patterns on his chest like she used to do in college. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Ethan pressed a kiss to the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "Now we figure out how to be a family. The 3 of us. It won't be easy. David won't just disappear, and there will be complications. Hey!" He tilted her face up to meet his eyes. "I'm not 25 anymore, Sophia. I'm not the selfish kid who let you walk away because I was too scared of commitment. You and Oliver, you're my whole world now. Whatever it takes, however long it takes. I'm not going anywhere." She smiled then, the first genuinely happy smile he'd seen from her since their reunion. "Promise?" "I promise," he said, sealing the vow with a kiss that tasted like forever. 6 months later. The Saturday morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Ethan's downtown loft as Oliver's laughter echoed from the kitchen. Sophia emerged from the bathroom, hair still damp from her shower, wearing one of Ethan's old college t-shirts that fell to mid-thigh. "Something smells like it's burning," she said, wrapping her arms around Ethan's waist from behind as he stood at the stove, flipping what appeared to be pancakes of questionable shape. "They're supposed to look like dinosaurs," he protested, leaning back into her embrace. "Oliver's request." "That one looks more like abstract art," she teased, pressing a kiss to his shoulder blade. "I think it's a stegosaurus," Oliver announced from his perch on the counter, syrup already somehow on his cheek despite not having eaten yet. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of legal meetings, family counseling sessions, and gradual integration. David had been hurt and angry, but eventually his genuine love for Oliver had led him to step aside gracefully, maintaining a relationship with the boy he'd helped raise while accepting that Sophia's heart belonged elsewhere. Thea, Corporate world had buzzed with gossip for weeks about the department head and his marketing specialist, but their professional relationship remained sterling. If anything, working together had only strengthened their bond, each challenge navigated as a team. "Breakfast is served," Ethan announced, presenting a plate of vaguely dinosaur-shaped pancakes with flourish. "These are perfect, Daddy," Oliver said solemnly, attacking his food with the enthusiasm only 5-year-olds possessed. Daddy. The word still sent warmth spreading through Ethan's chest every time he heard it. Legally, it was official now. The adoption papers had been finalized last month, making Oliver Rivera legally and completely his son. "So," Sophia said, stealing a bite of his pancake, "are you nervous about today?" Today. The day he'd been planning for months, with Oliver's enthusiastic help and blessing. His hand unconsciously went to his pocket, where a small velvet box waited. "Should I be?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "Oliver, why don't you go get dressed for the park?" Sophia suggested, ruffling their son's hair. Once Oliver had thundered off toward his room, she turned to face Ethan fully, her green eyes sparkling with mischief and love. "I know," she said simply. "Know what?" "About the ring. Oliver's been practicing his surprise face all week, and he's terrible at keeping secrets." Ethan groaned, dropping his forehead against hers. "That kid. Did you really think you could plan a proposal with a 5-year-old and keep it secret? I had hoped." He pulled back to study her face. "Are you upset?" "I wanted it to be a surprise." "Ethan Rivera," she said, framing his face with her hands. "I've been waiting for you to ask me to marry you since I was 20 years old. I don't need surprises. I just need you." The simple honesty of her words undid him completely. He dropped to one knee right there in their kitchen, pulling out the ring box with trembling hands. "Sophia Matthews," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "you are the strongest, most beautiful, most incredible woman I've ever known. You gave me the greatest gift in the world, our son. And then you forgave me enough to give me a second chance at the greatest love of my life." Tears were already streaming down her face, her hands pressed to her mouth. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making up for the time we lost? Will you make me the luckiest man alive by becoming my wife?" "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, a classic solitaire that caught the morning light and threw rainbows across the kitchen walls, and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed through her tears. "Is this the part where I'm supposed to look surprised?" Oliver's voice came from the doorway, where he stood fully dressed and grinning. "Come here, you," Ethan said, scooping Oliver up for a 3-way hug. "We're going to be a real family now." "We were always a real family, Daddy," Oliver said, with the wisdom that sometimes emerged from his 5-year-old observations. "Now we just have the papers to prove it." 1 year later, the garden wedding was small and perfect, just their closest. Friends and family gathered under the oak trees behind Sophia's parents' house. Oliver, in his tiny tuxedo, had walked his mother down the aisle with the serious dignity of someone entrusted with the most important job in the world. Now, as the reception wound down and their guests mingled in the golden evening light, Ethan pulled his wife into his arms for another dance. "No regrets?" he murmured against her ear as they swayed to the soft music. "Only that it took us so long to get here," she replied, her hand resting over his heart. "Daddy, Mama." Oliver ran up to them, his hair mussed and his bow tie askew from an afternoon of playing with his cousins. "Grandma says you're going to give me a baby sister." Sophia's cheeks flamed red as nearby relatives chuckled. "Oliver, what did we say about keeping some things private?" "But it's true, right?" he pressed, bouncing on his toes with excitement. "Because I asked Santa for a baby sister, and you said maybe Santa would bring one, but it might take 9 months for delivery." Ethan looked down at his wife, seeing the secret happiness glowing in her eyes. "Is it?" he asked quietly. She nodded, tears of joy gathering. 8 weeks. I wanted to wait until after the honeymoon to tell you, but apparently our son has other plans. He kissed her then, deep and passionate, not caring about their audience or the whoops of approval from their family and friends. When they broke apart, Oliver was still bouncing between them. "So, I'm going to be a big brother?" "Yes, sweetheart," Sophia said, kneeling to his level. "Are you excited?" "The most excited. I'm going to teach her everything, how to play cars and how to climb trees and how to make Daddy's pancakes look like real dinosaurs. What makes you so sure it's a sister?" Ethan asked, ruffling his son's hair. Oliver looked at him with the patient expression of someone explaining the obvious to a slow adult. "Because I already have the best daddy in the world. Now I need to be the best big brother to a little sister." The evening descended and the last guests departed. The 3 of them, soon to be 4, stood in the garden where they'd pledged their love. Oliver had fallen asleep against Ethan's shoulder, exhausted from the excitement. "Happy?" Ethan asked, his free arm wrapped around Sophia's waist. She leaned into him, her head on his shoulder, her hand resting on her still flat stomach where their second child grew. "Completely," she whispered. "This is everything I dreamed of when I was 22 and scared and alone. You, me, Oliver, and now—" She smiled, pressing closer. "Now we get to do it right from the beginning." "I love you, Mrs. Rivera," he said, the name still new and wonderful on his tongue. "I love you too, Mr. Rivera. Always have, always will." As they walked toward the house, their son sleeping peacefully between them and their future stretching. Bright and endless ahead, Ethan reflected on the strange turns life could take. 3 years ago, he'd been a man married to his career, convinced that success was measured in corner offices and quarterly reports. Now he knew better. Success was Oliver's sleepy mumble of, "Love you, Daddy," as he was tucked into bed. Success was Sophia's hand in his as they planned their future together. Success was the family they were building, one day, one moment, one second chance at a time. Some love stories ended with happily ever after. Theirs was just beginning.